Good evening again. This is Manoj here from Plus.ai. I think people are still joining, but we can start. So today's session is an interesting session. It's a session basically on ONDC plus OCEN. Now we have talked about ONDC a lot. We have understood what ONDC is, how it impacts, the SMEs who are participating, how it impacts e-commerce. Today, we are going to talk a little bit more about ONDC plus OCEN. OCEN is the focus today, and it's another initiative by Indian government, a beautiful initiative, a very revolutionary initiative, which started about 2 years ago. So it's not entirely very new, but in the context of ONDC, it becomes interesting. It becomes very powerful. It becomes much more powerful than, in my view, it was imagined. And this is what we are going to explore here, in a short while. How ONDC plus OCEN might work. While we look at ONDC, we will also look at OCEN, and then we will also look at both OCEN plus ONDC, how the interplay will happen, and how the orchestration of different transactions will happen, right? So basically, ONDC plus OCEN is India's e-commerce network combined with India's lending network, and that is basically the highlight here. So what is ONDC? I think I've talked about it a lot, so I'm going to be very quick here. So ONDC is basically an open network for digital commerce, which means that it's a network which is decentralized, democratized. Anyone can participate. No one needs anyone's permission to participate. It's basically a network which is about digital commerce. It's a network which is about e-commerce, broadly across categories, across location, across business models. So it's not limited to only Flipkart and Amazon kind of stuff. Actually, it's designed for the smallest of the seller. It's designed for that kirana wala who is sitting somewhere in the corner of a neighborhood and today is not able to participate in e-commerce, right? So it's a beautiful initiative by Indian government to increase e-commerce penetration in India. And it's based on a protocol called backend protocol. Now backend protocol, you might not have heard about it, but it's a protocol which basically is being developed by Backend Foundation, and it's basically has multiple use cases across multiple domains. And ONDC is one of the avatars of Backend protocol. We are also seeing a similar avatar as UHI, which again, in somewhat based on Backend protocol. Right. I'm going to answer the questions, in a while. Like, I don't want the flow to disrupt multiple times, but I'll take the questions in between whenever I, feel that, there's a transition in the presentation. And what is OCEN? See, OCEN is Open Credit Enablement Network. Again, the two words here which repeats from the ONDC, which is open network, right? And what is different is credit and commerce, right? So again, it's an open network, and so it's a network and it's open. But this is for credit, this is for loans, this is for your working capital requirements, this is for your even for personal loans. So this is all about credit. This is not about commerce at all, right? So idea here is that it's again an initiative by Indian government to increase lending penetration in India. ONDC is about e-commerce penetration in India. OCEN is, to increase the lending penetration in India, which means that anyone who is the smallest of the entity here, a pani puri wala or a sabji wala, should be able to take a loan from the network without going through a lot of hassles of taking loan and submitting documents and time it takes, kind of stuff. So the loan, has to be quick and has to be hassle free. Now these are the two things that OCEN enables, because it is digitized in nature. It doesn't have any paperwork. It doesn't have any paper which has to travel from one distance to another, right? So it's very quick. And this is again designed for smallest of the seller, smallest of the entity, smallest of individual who wants to take wants to take a loan, and today is not able to take loan, and should be able to take a loan, right? Imagine like, in OCEN perspective, not in ONDC perspective. Imagine, someone who is a rickshaw wala, for example, or auto rickshaw wala, or someone who, is a labor, right? They have to today take a loan, intraday loan, right, from people who charge them, anywhere from 100% to 300% interest rate, right? The idea is that can these people take loans, instant loans from OCEN network, if the history, of repayment can be, validated, if their cash flow can be validated, and those kind of stuff, right? So the spirit of OCEN is that, to enable credit for smallest of the individual entity in the ecosystem. And OCEN protocol is built by iSpert. Basically, it's again a non-profit organization which is developing, it's around software products. So you can look more about iSpert on Google, but it is not developed by backend protocol. It's not driven by backend protocol. It's driven by someone by a different organization. So what is the buzz in media? And I think we have looked at this slide. If you have attended my webinar before, you might have looked at this previously. A lot of buzz in ONDC. This is going to be a revolution. This is going to be something which is going to transform e-commerce. This is going to be something which is going to transform your hyperlocal, discovery of products. This is going to transform who participate, who does, who it is basically giving a level playing field to everyone, right? So it's some ways it's a new democracy in e-commerce which is coming up. So that's what is exciting about ONDC. Everyone is participating from big to small, whether it's Google or whether it's your smallest of the Kirana store, Grocery Mart, Gupta Kirana store, or Shama Kirana store. Everyone is participating in this, and that is what makes it very exciting. And that is where the action is and excitement is. Now OCEN is of course something, as I said, is 2-year-old. Again, a lot of buzz in the media. It's going to transform credit. It's going to it's going to be disruption in lending. It's basically going to take MSME and individual lending to a next level. So it's like UPI for lending in some ways, right? So that is basically is the buzz here. Again, very interesting, very transformative, and very innovative in a lot of ways. So what's of impact of ONDC? I think that's something that we looked in the previous webinars, is that 30 to 50 crore customers are expected to transact on ONDC network. More than 100 crore orders per month are expected to get generated on ONDC network. 1.5 crore sellers are expected to use ONDC. It's a huge network. I mean, it's like the whole India has come to do online, selling and buying. 75% pin code coverage from 20-25% pin code coverage that we have today. And the biggest thing is that the discovery of your local products. Now you may be staying in a particular city or particular locality. For example, you may be in like HSR layout in Bangalore, you may be in Chandni Chowk in Delhi, or you may be in Kandivali in Mumbai, or Shahi Bagh in Ahmedabad. But you don't know a lot of your stores. You are looking to buy iPhone, you're looking to buy shampoo, you're looking to buy Ayurvedic products. But you're looking at Amazon and Flipkart, who have to take that product like thousands of kilometers to deliver to you, right? It's a waste of money, it's a waste of resources, it's a waste of the whole clean just takes a lot of resources, right? It has those, okay, that's climate issues, right? A lot of packaging, a lot of cardboard is generated. Why this needs to happen when your iPhone, your Ayurvedic product, and your shampoo is actually lying very close to you, but you don't know about it, right? If you knew it existed there, it's actually faster for you to get it quickly. It's very fast, like it's like almost like 100 meters or 200 meters, 500 meters from you. So it can be delivered like in 10 minutes and 5 minutes or 15 minutes, right? And it's you have a lot of trust, right? If something goes bad with the product, product is not good, you can go back to the kirana wala or the retail shop in your neighborhood and say, why, this is not good, I want it to be replaced. So you have a lot of trust in that, right? And it might be cheaper also, because it just cost less for everyone, right? So why wouldn't you do that? I mean, that is one of the biggest impact of ONDC that you will see, is that you will know your neighborhood like you never knew, right? You would know what is there in your neighborhood, in which shop, what product is lying, which services are available around you, who is the, like for example, who is providing accounting service, or who is providing insurance in your neighborhood, or who is providing tutoring services, that you today don't know. I mean, that is the discovery part which ONDC is going to enable a lot. So it's as I said, it's a category agnostic, it's a business model agnostic, and it's location agnostic. And that's the beauty of ONDC, that all kind of e-commerce can happen on ONDC, and that is what's going to create a lot of impact for everyone. So ONDC transforms in a lot of ways a hyperlocal e-commerce, and you will see hyperlocal e-commerce boom like anything because of ONDC. Impact of OCEN, right? What is the impact of OCEN? We looked at the impact of ONDC. We understand it's going to have a lot of impact. What is the impact of OCEN? Well, the OCEN's impact is expected that close to only 10% of MSMEs actually have access to formal credit in India. Right, 90% of the MSMEs actually are not able to get access to credit in India. And a lot of these MSMEs, they struggle not because they are profitable. They're actually very profitable, not because they're unprofitable. It's basically they're very profitable, but because they have cash flow issues. And a lot of these cash flow issues can be resolved if they could get credit very quickly, right, from formal channels without a lot of hassles, right, at an attractive interest rate, right? So today that is not possible. If you are an MSME, right, and if your turnover is not very huge, and if you don't have any collateral, right, it's difficult, very difficult to get credit in India right now. And that is basically is what OCEN is trying to unlock, is the $1 trillion of lending, which today is not possible. Can OCEN do that, through an open network? And that 60 million SMEs, we're talking of lot of 6 crore SMEs who basically can get access to credit very quickly. Not just, SMEs that we're talking about, even like individuals, if they can get credit very quickly for their daily use, whatever, they're buying something, or they or they are looking for anything where a property or those kind of stuff. If they can get lending very quickly, that can be very transformative. Like, so it's a real-time lending we're talking about. It is 10 lending we're talking about where dispersal happens within 5 minutes. We're talking about that. We're not talking about 5 days or 5 hours. We're not talking about 5 months. We're talking about 5 minutes. Can we get into real-time lending in less than 5 minutes? And that is what OCEN is trying to do. Your intraday lending, which is today, is through informal channels, your rickshawalas and those kind of stuff. That will become more formal, right? Micro lending, small amounts of lending, 1,000 rupees, 500 rupees, 10,000 rupees lending. That is not possible today. It's not possible at all unless you go through informal channels. Although you can get it, but for banks, for lenders, it's not feasible for you to give you 10,000 rupees loan, because the cost of that loan itself might be, for 10,000 rupees loan, it may be 3,000 rupees. Right? So that doesn't make sense. Why would someone, pay 3,000 rupees for 10,000 rupee loan? That just is huge. But that's the cost we are talking about in today's, where you have DSAs, where you have, you have paperwork, where you have KYC, which is on paper. All this takes money and time, right? So, and so micro lending is not possible. And OCEN supports all kind of loan products, and like ONDC supports all kind of categories. It basically cash flow based lending and use based lending. If you're looking to buy property, that's end use based. If you're looking to buy machinery, if you're looking for funding your processing of your raw material, so and personal and business loans both, right? So OCEN, if you look at it, ONDC transforms in a lot of ways your hyperlocal e-commerce. OCEN transforms your real-time micro lending, right? Real-time and micro lending, and that is the power of OCEN. It can really, once it is fully bloomed, it can actually create a lot of impact on the business, viability and sustainability and growth around us. So now basically we have talked about ONDC, what is ONDC? We've talked about OCEN, what is OCEN? And we have talked about the impact of ONDC, and we have talked about the impact of OCEN, right? And by this time you have basically sort of understood that this is, both of them standalone are very, very powerful for India. And of course the journey has just started, right? But a lot of expectation. Now getting into the architecture part, of ONDC and OCEN. ONDC is basically, as you might have seen that before from me, or if you're attending these webinars for the first time, ONDC architecture basically has primarily a buyer app and seller app. So what ONDC has done is that it has broken down a Flipkart or Amazon kind of e-commerce store into a buyer app side, where the buyer app's responsibility is to get customers, manage refunds, those kind of stuff, and the seller app, which basically the responsibility of seller app is to get supply, is to manage dispatch, manage the QC, right? Manage the catalog, right? So ONDC is basically is a language, is a protocol, it is specification that has been put between the seller app and the buyer app, and said that you can talk in this language only, so that others, everyone can understand, right? And you as an entity has to choose yourself, which role do you want to play? You want to play a role of a buyer app, or you want to play a role of a seller app, right? If you have strength in marketing, if you have a lot of customers coming to a platform, if you have captive base of customers where you already are there right now, you can choose to be a buyer app, right? When you choose to be a buyer app, you get the supply of those ONDC, from seller apps immediately. You don't have to do anything. You can start selling any category of product. You can start selling any price of the product, and you don't have to worry about the inventory of the product. You don't have to worry about managing dispatch and those kind of stuff, right? If you're a seller app, immediately you get access to 30 crore to 50 crore customers immediately. As soon as you join ONDC network, you basically get access to 30 to 50 crore customers. And that is basically means that each one of you will have, you can claim that you have 30 to 50 crore customers, which you can target, right? And that is powerful, right? Other than basically the buyer app and seller app, the ecosystem has a gateway, which basically which is used to broadcast the search queries. I will not go into a lot of detail there. It has registry where all the seller app and the buyer app have to register on registry to participate in ONDC. If you're not part of registry, if you're not part of registry, you cannot participate on ONDC, right? So one thing which you need to do is, if you have to participate, get registered on the registry. Today it's a manual process, so unfortunately it's not an automatic process, but eventually, of course, it will become automatic in nature. And then basically there are a lot of other things. Now, one thing which you have noticed here is the OCEN is sitting on the left hand side of the screen, and basically that has been there for a certain reason, which we'll get into how OCEN will play a role in ONDC and vice versa, right? So basically this is just another rendition of architecture where I'm up behind the seller app are sellers, right? And behind and in front of the buyer app are buyers, right? So when you look at a seller app, you have to assume the sellers are behind. Now a seller himself can be a seller app, no one is stopping that, but usually there will be aggregators of seller, which will come on a seller app, and then basically the seller app will talk to the buyer app. And similarly, there'll be aggregators or buyers, and the buyers will go to a buyer app and buy, right? So this is basically just to illustrate. So what is now? You looked at ONDC architecture, right? You said there's a buyer app. You saw there's a buyer app and there's a seller app. There's a registry, right? And then the sellers are behind seller app, and buyer apps are, buyers are in front of buyer apps, and that's the architecture of ONDC. OCEN architecture is sort of similar in nature. Of course, there is no gateway in between. In OCEN, what you have on one side is lender apps, basically people who lend, basically who give credit, who basically give money into the network. And the other side are LSP apps. Basically, these are your lending apps, basically, who are helping to get basically the borrowers onto the network, right? And other than the LSP apps, which are basically your lending apps, and the lender apps, basically if you also have registry where you have to become part of registry, again, to participate in OCEN you have to become part of registry. And then you also have your financial information provider and account aggregator. Now these two, FIP and AA, account aggregator, are something which is unique to in some ways OCEN and are not there in ONDC. But FIP are needed because who are FIPs? FIPs are your banks who give information about your banking data, like how much balance you have, how many transactions you have had, right? FIP are like your mutual funds, who give information about, how much you have invested into mutual fund. FIP is like your GST, GSTN basically, where GSTN will tell, lender, what kind of transactions you have been doing, what kind of invoices are getting, generated for you, those kind of stuff. And account aggregator is basically a consent, because you are sharing information in this network. The borrower has to share the information to the lender, right? So the consent has to go from the borrower to the lender, and account aggregator play a role there, for to make sure the consent is shared between the borrower and the lender, right? So it's a pretty similar, in architecture, from when you look at ONDC and OCEN. Of course, there's some differences. As I said, FIP and account aggregators don't exist in the ONDC architecture. Now I'll quickly take few questions, and we can. Focusing on, okay, first question is focusing on MSMEs. What role could a payment processor, payment acceptance player play by combining the power of ONDC and OCEN? Okay, so basically what I'm assuming is that you are looking at ONDC plus OCEN. How can you participate in ONDC plus OCEN ecosystem if you are a payment gateway? Now, if you are a payment gateway, I'm not sure, what restrictions you might have. There might be some restrictions whether you can participate in ONDC or OCEN or both of them. But I will actually, answer, how people can participate in both the networks in my next few slides. So I'll take this question and answer this in just few minutes. How to get registered with ONDC? Okay, ONDC registration is a bit manual process right now, and the manual process is that you have to write to team@ondc.org, and they would then add you to their Slack channel, which is their ONDC Slack channel. And in that ONDC Slack channel, you will have to do few things, which is a bit complicated for me to tell you right now. But it's sort of, you have to share your your URL, URI ID, and your BPP ID, and public and private keys, and they will then add you to the registry, which is a staging registry right now. It's not the production registry. Once you pass through few tests, few certification, few things that you have done, then you can be moved to production registry. But today, if you are starting, you will only be, will be participating in the staging registry, which is a testing kind of registry. It's not where you cannot do transactions fully. Other questions? How can we make loan through OCEN already registered GST and MSME? Yeah, so I'll again answer that question in a bit. Uh, Hopefully by the end of the session you will be able to get the answer to this. So I'll continue my presentation going forward. So again, this is an illustration of the same thing, that OCEN architecture has behind the lender app, lenders, lender A, lender B, and behind the LSP app, in front of LSP app are borrowers, right, who are basically using the app to borrow from the OCEN network, right? And what are the examples, right? Buyer apps. When we look at buyer apps, the example of buyer apps would be, for example, Paytm, Airtel, Google Pay, even like banks, ICICI banks. So these people, because they have a lot of traffic, they're actually ideal for a buyer app. They today they cannot participate in e-commerce because ICICI Bank will say, how do I participate in e-commerce? Because I need to get supply. But it's possible. In ONDC network, they can participate because they don't need to worry about supply. The supply will come from the seller apps who are offering the supply to the ONDC network. And your seller apps are primarily, you can assume that a lot of these seller apps would be aggregators of sellers in your locality. Maybe Chandni Chowk might have a seller app who's aggregating Chandni Chowk's retailers. Your Bandra Linking Road might have a seller app where they're aggregating Bandra Linking Road retailers and kirana walas, right? So you can assume that seller apps would be those, and buyer apps would be someone who has a lot of traffic in ONDC. Now in OCEN, what kind of who can be LSP app? Basically people who can be people who are where the borrowers are coming, right? So for example, Paytm can be LSP app because a lot of people are coming there. Swiggy can be LSP app. Google Pay can be Car Dekho. People who are getting a lot of consumers, getting a lot of business people coming to their platform, they can all be LSP apps because they can in some ways power lending through OCEN network, where they don't need to give the money. The lenders are on the other side, which can be your Bajaj Finserv, HDFC Bank, Kotak, ICICI Bank. So these can be NBFCs on the other side, right? So the lender apps are primarily NBFCs and banks and lending organizations. And LSP apps are primarily, again, same with the buyer app in ONDC. These are again people who are getting a lot of traffic. They have a lot of consumers or business people coming to their network. Now in ONDC, what are responsibilities of seller app? Seller app has to manage catalog, get suppliers, do QC, do dispatch, manage courier, in some ways do home delivery. The buyer apps have to get marketing, acquire customers, payments, create a website or a mobile app, do customer service, do customer refunds. So that's basically the responsibilities of the buyer app and the responsibility of the seller app, right? In OCEN, basically, again, the LSP apps are primarily consumer facing. So they have to do marketing, they have to manage the consent, they have to acquire customers, they have to manage the loan offers, they have to create a mobile app or a website where people can come. While lender apps, the people who are lending have to, their primary responsibility is to underwrite, create loan offers, manage the consent, grant loan, disperse loan, and then get data from your, FIPs, which are your financial information provider, right? So that basically is the role of a lender app and the role of a LSP app. Now now this is where the interesting combination of OCEN plus ONDC, if you look at them together, right, can happen, right? In ONDC, for example, a buyer buys a product from a seller, buyer A buys a product from seller A, right? Now both seller A and buyer A might need credit, might need a loan. Now buyer A might need a loan to buy the product, just a small loan, 500 rupees, 1000 rupees. We have BNPL today, buy now pay later. So in the similar way, they need a credit from someone, and they end use what they're using it for is very clear. It's they're buying this product, right? So the loan is for a particular end use, which is for buying, right, a product. The seller A, who has gotten the order and need to fulfill the order, might need a loan for the cash flow, because he doesn't have money right now to buy the product and dispatch. So seller might need an instant loan to deliver the goods to the order, right? Now this is where the OCEN starts to become very interesting, because the seller can then become a borrower, and the buyer can also become a borrower on a particular LSP app, right? They can go and say, I want this loan, right? Now for this to happen, without any interference, without they going out of the network, right? For this to happen seamlessly, the LSP app, can be a buyer app, right? If your buyer app is your LSP app, right? If your seller app is also LSP app, now then it becomes very interesting, right? Because now you have gone to, for example, let's take Paytm, right, to buy a jewelry, and for the same for buying, you might immediately use same Paytm app as a LSP app to take a loan for that product, right? So that you can buy it. So in a way, Paytm is both a LSP app and also a buyer app, right? Now a seller, if it's on, let's say, for example, let's take Flipkart. So if the Flipkart is a seller app, for example, let's say, assume that a seller can basically gets an order from ONDC on the Flipkart seller app. Now they can use the Flipkart seller app can be LSP for the OCEN network, and basically enable the loan for the seller immediately, right? So with with a very tight integration, where the LSP app is same as the buyer app, and LSP app also same as the seller app, right? The OCEN and ONDC interaction will become seamless, and it will not even be it basically, the ONDC will fuel OCEN, and OCEN will fuel ONDC, and both of these networks are massive in nature, right? So just imagine both of them fueling each other, right? And becoming a very powerful engine for the growth of commerce in India, right? And that is basically is what is an interesting construct which comes out of when you look at ONDC and OCEN together and say, oh wow, this is very interesting, and it can be a game changer. Now having said that, it is not a simple to integrate both of them onto a single platform. Both of them have different APIs and different interactions happening, and all these interactions have to happen very quickly. It cannot be that seller is waiting for a loan for like a couple of days, because your customer on the other side has to have product within few hours or days. So seller cannot wait for a few days, right? So seller has to get that credit very quickly, and the buyer has to get that credit very quickly because buyer is buying in real time. I cannot wait for the credit to come for a few days, right? And the cost of lending and the cost of e-commerce and the cost of everything has to be very low, right? If it's not low, then it's not easy for people to participate. Now I'll skip the slides here because these are about APIs and those kind of stuff, and given the time constraint we have, I don't want to get into the technicalities of it, but primarily these are the APIs of ONDC and these are the APIs of OCEN, right? The 22 APIs which I could see in OCEN network, and there are about 13 APIs that I can see in ONDC network, right? And those are the 30, 35 or APIs which can actually create huge impact on Indian e-commerce and business ecosystem together. Now this is the slide which basically is, if you look at it, it's very powerful, right? ONDC is for revenue, and OCEN is for lending, and UPI is for payment, right? And these are all very large ecosystems, but they're designed for the smallest of the individual, for the smallest of the business owner, for the smallest of establishment, service provider. They're not designed for the largest. So the largest of the network is being designed for the smallest. And all these things are basically the smallest Kirana store. Just take an example, is using ONDC for revenue, is using ONDC for lending, and using ONDC or UPI for payment, right? And this what we call is the impact at population scale, right? Our population is 1.4 billion people, and to create impact at the lowest possible, at the smallest level, is not easy in any part of the world. But in India, we are able to do that, and that is what is amazing about ONDC, about token or UPI, and a lot of other things which are coming in the health network, which is UHI, again designed for the smallest, and that is what is interesting. Now, if you have any questions, you can always write to me at ondc@plaus.ai or oken@plaus.ai, and we'll happy to answer. I'll take few questions right now, just before we. Is it must lending app in this gateway? I'm seller app side in ONDC. I'm not able to understand the question, but I'm assuming that you're saying, can the seller app be the lending app? The lending is basically, lending app is a very specialized function. It usually comes under RBI guidelines, right? If you want to be a lender, you have to basically be RBI certified and those kind of stuff. So a seller app, becoming a seller app is not a huge certification process, and RBI doesn't come into picture, right? So it's difficult for a seller app to be a lending app, but definitely a seller app can be a LSP app, right? As I said, and a buyer app can be a LSP app, and LSP app can be buyer app or seller app, right? Both of them, right? So if you're looking at, let's assume you're a seller app and you're looking at ONDC, you should also look at OCEN, because it may be that if you combine these two, it can be very interesting, and you can differentiate against all other seller apps. And of course, to become an LSP, there is of course some certification that you have to take, but it's not that difficult. And yeah, so that's basically is what I hope I was able to answer that question. Now this is basically where I want to end the session. I hope you could get a very good idea of OCEN and a very good idea of ONDC. But beyond that, you are able to get a very good idea of how OCEN plus ONDC together is going to transform the business ecosystem in India, because both of them are designed for the smallest of the business owner, and it can be very transformative. With that, I end this session. I hope this was useful for you all, and I'll see you all in the next session with more interesting topics to discuss. Thank you, everyone.